What if the history books you read are missing half the story? We're not talking about kings and conquerors today. We're unearthing the true, vibrant tapestry of ancient societies by listening to the whispers of those who were written out, the forgotten laborers, the defiant rebels, the marginalized voices whose struggles and triumphs shaped the past as much as any emperor. The great civilizations that shaped the ancient world left behind towering monuments, carefully carved inscriptions, and meticulously preserved records of kings, priests, generals, and wealthy elites. They constructed histories that emphasized conquest and divine authority, presenting a polished image of order and power that radiated across the ages. Yet beneath those grand narratives lay countless voices that went unheard, voices of the poor, the enslaved, the displaced, and the forgotten. Their lives formed the foundation upon which empires stood, but their stories slipped into obscurity, buried within the dust of time. This exploration seeks to bring those shadowed histories into the light, recreating the world from the perspective of people who were rarely granted the right to define their own existence. Long before the earliest writing systems emerged, human societies were already complex networks of relationships, struggles, and adaptations. The first settlements that rose along the Fertile Crescent relied on labor from families who never owned the fields they cultivated or the livestock they tended. As city-states grew, the bureaucratic tablets they produced documented transactions, marriages, debts, and temple offerings, yet seldom captured the emotional and social realities of the individuals performing the work. To reconstruct their lives, historians rely on fragments, broken pottery, footprints near hearths, and the patterns of wear on tools. These remnants speak of lives embedded within the rhythms of survival, gathering water before sunrise, weaving baskets in dim, smoky homes, tending children while shaping clay vessels that would end up in markets or temple storerooms. Even without written testimony, these silent objects mirror the presence of those who stood at the margins. Within ancient Mesopotamia, the voices of enslaved individuals formed a significant but overlooked thread in the fabric of society. Although cuneiform tablets mention them, the descriptions are impersonal, reducing human beings to units of labor, property transfers, or punishments. But their stories do not stay silent. Archaeological studies reveal living quarters cramped and dark, located near workshops where the enslaved performed tasks ranging from grinding grain to weaving textiles. The repetitive strain on bones found in excavated remains tells us they worked from childhood into old age, often with little rest. Yet the presence of personal amulets, hidden beneath floorboards, reveals attempts to maintain a sense of identity and spiritual hope. These small charms, often depicting protective deities, show that even within bondage, individuals clung to a belief in forces greater than their oppressors, hoping for protection, dignity, or freedom. The great cities of Egypt also relied on laborers who rarely saw their names recorded beside the monumental achievements they helped build. The pyramids, often mythologized as the handiwork of thousands of slaves, were in reality constructed largely by skilled workers who lived in organized communities. Yet even within these groups, hierarchies dictated who received recognition and who remained invisible. Foremen and artisans had their names preserved in hieroglyphic inscriptions, while the lower workers, those responsible for hauling stones, mixing mortar, preparing food, and repairing tools, appeared only in tally marks and supply logs. Their lives were shaped by harsh physical labor, yet they created intricate networks of companionship and mutual support. Excavations of worker villages reveal ample evidence of shared meals, community rituals, and informal gatherings. These traces highlight that even those hidden from official histories built their own microcultures, rich with humor, grief, and resilience. Beyond the major civilizations, marginalized communities existed in landscapes where few elite records survive. Nomadic groups, for instance, often lacked writing traditions, leaving later historians to rely on biased accounts written by sedentary neighbors who viewed them as threats or nuisances. Yet modern studies of their campsites show sophisticated understanding of ecology, animal behavior, and movement across vast terrains. Clothing fragments, tools, and burial sites indicate roles within their societies that differed significantly from settled populations. Women in certain nomadic cultures were powerful decision-makers, managing livestock, interpreting spiritual signs, and negotiating alliances. Their authority, seldom acknowledged in the histories penned by neighboring states, shaped the political landscapes of entire regions. The absence of written testimony does not imply the absence of agency. It simply reveals which voices dominant narratives preferred to exclude. In ancient Greece, the birthplace of philosophy and democracy, the vast majority of inhabitants had no political rights. Enslaved people, foreign-born residents, laborers, and most women existed outside the celebrated civic ideal. Classical historians devoted extensive attention to the lives of generals, orators, and thinkers, yet the workers who maintained households, cleaned streets, prepared food, and carried out agricultural tasks remained unacknowledged. Still, their imprint endures in the substructures of daily life. The ashes found in communal kitchens, the wear marks on water-carrying vessels, and the arrangement of crowded living quarters reveal routines shaped by necessity rather than choice. Theater, considered a cornerstone of Greek culture, likely borrowed jokes, songs, and observations overheard from these very individuals. Their laughter, frustrations, and gossip formed a living current beneath the great performances that still captivate audiences today. On the other side of the Mediterranean, the Roman Empire constructed an even larger machinery of marginalization. With its vast reach, Rome absorbed and transformed communities across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Many of the conquered peoples found themselves uprooted, their languages suppressed, and their identities reshaped by imperial expectations. Legionary records, triumphal arches, and marble statues celebrated military victories. But the experiences of villagers whose lands were seized or of families forced into urban slums remained untold. Excavations in the outskirts of Roman cities uncover clusters of tiny dwellings where migrants lived in overcrowded conditions, surviving on irregular wages and leftover food. These spaces bore witness to the dreams and disappointments of people navigating the harsh realities of empire. Their pottery reflects cultural blending, with designs from distant homelands appearing alongside Roman motifs, a silent testament to resilience amid displacement. Women across ancient societies carried burdens rarely acknowledged in official narratives. Even in cultures where elite women exercised some power, the vast majority of women engaged in continuous labor, grinding grain, fetching water, tending livestock, raising children, producing textiles, and maintaining household economies. Their medical knowledge, passed through generations, shaped community health practices. Yet male-dominated texts recorded only small fragments of this wisdom, often dismissing it as superstition. Grave goods found in female burials, spindles, herb pouches, figurines of fertility deities reveal the roles they held as healers, protectors, and guardians of continuity. Through rituals performed at births, weddings, harvests, and funerals, women preserved cultural identity even as wars, migrations, and crises reshaped the world around them. Their voices, though largely absent from inscriptions, lived in songs, laments, and whispered stories shared across generations.
In the Indus Valley, one of the world's earliest urban civilizations, the silence is even more profound because its script remains undeciphered. Without translation, historians must rely entirely on material evidence to understand the society. The standardized weights, uniform bricks, and precise city planning suggest a remarkable degree of social coordination. Yet, what of the individuals who lived there? Their homes, often modest in size, contain grinding stones, beads, and figurines that hint at both ordinary domestic routines and personal spiritual practices. The figurines, often depicting women, may reflect ideals of fertility, protection, or ancestry. They serve as echoes of inner lives that official urban planning did not capture. The absence of palaces or lavish tombs suggests that power may have been more evenly distributed than in neighboring cultures. But even so, inequality likely existed. The challenge is that the marginalized left few direct traces, requiring historians to reconstruct their experiences from the shadows cast by architecture and artifacts. Across ancient Africa, countless societies thrived with rich oral traditions that colonial-era scholarship dismissed or ignored. Their histories were preserved not through stone inscriptions, but through storytelling, dance, music, and ritual performance. Griots, elders, and community leaders carried genealogies, moral lessons, and accounts of migration across centuries. Within these narratives lived the contributions of farmers, hunters, potters, and herbalists whose labor sustained the community. Although droughts, invasions, and cultural transformations erased many of their material traces, the oral traditions remain a living archive of marginalized experiences. These histories reveal worlds where everyday labor was intertwined with spiritual meaning, where individual identity was shaped through collective memory, and where authority derived from service rather than wealth. Indigenous cultures in the Americas faced a similar fate, their stories often overshadowed by later colonial narratives. Yet long before European arrival, complex societies flourished, with traders, farmers, artisans, and storytellers shaping vibrant networks of exchange. The cliff dwellings of the Southwest, the earthen mounds of the Mississippi Valley, and the rainforest communities of the Amazon each hold evidence of societies where marginalized voices participated in shaping everyday life. Family farms managed by women sustained entire communities. Collective labor built terraces and irrigation systems. Rituals honoring ancestors connected individuals to landscapes across centuries. Even when elites emerged, power often operated within community frameworks that valued cooperation. The destruction brought by colonization obscured these histories, but archaeology and surviving oral traditions continue to reveal them. Across all ancient cultures, marginalized voices shared a common trait. They existed within systems that valued their labor yet denied them agency. The narratives we reconstruct today challenge the traditional belief that history is merely the record of kings and empires. Instead, it becomes a living tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives: farmers who shaped landscapes, artisans who mastered materials, mothers who preserved traditions, migrants who blended cultures, and enslaved individuals who carried hope across generations. Theirs is the history that lingers behind the monuments, the whispered story that persists even when official records fall silent. To uncover their narratives is not merely to expand historical knowledge, but to honor the humanity of those who lived without the privilege of self-documentation.
The further we move into the layered depths of ancient societies, the clearer it becomes that the voices pushed to the margins were not silent by nature. They were made silent by structures of power that favored the preservation of elite perspectives. Yet the endurance of marginalized communities is written into the physical landscapes they shaped, the crafts they perfected, and the subtle resistances they enacted. By shifting the focus away from royal inscriptions and monumental achievements and instead looking closely at the spaces where ordinary people lived and worked, we uncover a world filled with stories of adaptation, suffering, creativity, and resilience. These stories do not merely supplement traditional history, they challenge its foundations by revealing the lives that truly sustained ancient civilizations. Among the most marginalized figures in many ancient societies were those who labored on the peripheries of cities, far from the temples and palaces that dominated official records.
These individuals worked in dusty pottery yards, in smoky metal forging workshops, in tanneries where fumes clung to skin and clothing, and in quarries where stonecutters carved raw blocks destined for elite monuments. Their names do not appear in the inscriptions celebrating triumphs or divine blessings, yet their fingerprints are literally baked into clay vessels, etched into stone surfaces, and embedded within the layers of debris that archaeologists meticulously excavate. Through these traces, we begin to understand the physical toll of labor, the calluses on fingertips, the curvature of spine altered by years of lifting, and the respiratory problems caused by inhaling mineral dust. These aspects of ancient life, though rarely recorded, were universal experiences that shaped the rhythms of countless communities. One of the richest sources of insight into the lives of the marginalized comes from ancient households. Domestic spaces, often overlooked by earlier generations of scholars, reveal the social and emotional worlds that official histories ignored. In modest homes across Mesopotamia, community ovens constructed from mud brick were shared among several families. Such ovens were not merely functional structures, but hubs of social interaction, where women exchanged stories, taught children, and reinforced bonds that helped them navigate broader social inequalities. Grinding stones found with layers of repeated abrasion showed the monotony of daily tasks, yet the smooth surfaces also revealed the subtle adaptations developed over generations to ease exertion. Household shrines, decorated with simple figurines or hand-drawn symbols, attest to spiritual practices passed orally, connecting families with ancestors or local deities who offered comfort in difficult times. In Egypt, burial practices provide one of the most detailed windows into the experiences of marginalized individuals. While elite tombs showcase wealth and mythological narratives, the graves of common people often consist of simple pits containing modest offerings, woven mats, clay lamps, beads made from bone or shell, and occasionally small amulets placed near the heart. These humble objects speak volumes about love, loss, and hope. They reveal that families, despite economic hardship, honored the dead with whatever resources they could manage. Many of these graves include pottery with fingerprints or small carvings that indicate the deceased or their loved ones crafted the objects themselves, reflecting a deeply personal connection to the burial process. Through these remnants, we learn that grief in the ancient world was not reserved for the elite. It permeated every level of society, shaping rituals and beliefs that helped communities endure.
Expanding our lens beyond the powerful centers of civilization, we encounter marginalized groups that existed not within the boundaries of cities, but along their fringes. Traders who traveled between regions, often carrying goods across dangerous terrains, formed communities that blended languages, customs, and spiritual practices. Because they lacked permanent settlements, their histories were rarely documented, except when they appeared in tax records or legal disputes. Yet their contributions were essential to the flow of materials, such as tin, obsidian, spices, and precious stones, commodities that royal elites relied on for prestige. Archaeological discoveries of caravan routes reveal resting sites marked by broken pottery, fire pits, and animal bones. These sites show that traders forged temporary, mobile communities where stories, songs, and survival strategies were shared. Their flexibility allowed them to navigate diverse cultural landscapes, making them carriers not only of goods, but of knowledge and identity. For many societies, marginalized groups also included those whose spiritual practices diverged from state-sanctioned religion. Shamans, healers, diviners, and midwives often held paradoxical roles, respected by their communities, yet distrusted by authorities. Their knowledge of herbs, rituals, and symbolic interpretation came from generations of observation and practice rather than formal temple training. Because their skills lay outside elite control, they were often portrayed in official records as suspicious or dangerous.
Yet archaeological evidence, such as bundles of medicinal plants found in graves, carvings depicting healing rituals, and traces of ceremonial spaces in remote areas, demonstrates their enduring importance. These individuals guided communities through illness, childbirth, drought, and death, offering forms of solace that institutional religion could not always provide. Their voices may not survive in texts, but their legacies live on in the cultural continuities observed in later folk traditions. Ancient cities were architectural embodiments of inequality. In nearly every major urban center, from Babylon to Athens, from Teotihuacan to Chang'an, the spatial layout reflected social hierarchy. Wealthy families resided near political or religious centers, enjoying access to clean water, wide streets, and market privileges. Meanwhile, marginalized communities were pushed to the peripheries, where narrow alleys, insufficient sanitation, and overcrowded housing created constant obstacles. Yet these marginalized districts were vibrant hubs of creativity and solidarity. Excavations in such quarters frequently reveal workshops where artisans experimented with new techniques, communal wells where neighbors negotiated resource sharing, and small courtyards where children played while mothers prepared food. These urban ecosystems challenge the assumption that marginalization equated to cultural stagnation. Instead, they demonstrate how innovation often emerged from necessity. One of the most profound forms of marginalization in the ancient world involved displacement. Natural disasters, wars, and political upheavals forced countless individuals to flee their homes, creating migrant populations whose histories were rarely recorded. After volcanic eruptions, such as the catastrophic event that destroyed Thera, refugees carried fragments of their former lives, tools, jewelry, seeds, to new regions where they attempted to rebuild. Their material culture, blended with that of host communities, shaped hybrid traditions that influenced art, language, and agriculture. Similarly, after invasions or political collapses, families uprooted from Levantine towns, Anatolian villages, or Nubian settlements traveled long distances in search of safety. Though elite histories portrayed these movements as chaotic disruptions, archaeology reveals stories of determination. Temporary shelters organized with remarkable efficiency, portable cooking vessels indicating continuity of cuisine, and makeshift altars demonstrating the persistence of spiritual identity.
In many civilizations, enslaved individuals not only faced physical oppression but systematic erasure of identity. Yet traces of their resilience appear in unexpected places. In Rome, for example, graffiti carved into walls by enslaved laborers reveal humor, frustration, and longing. A simple drawing of a ship on a workshop wall, perhaps sketched by someone who once lived near the sea, suggests a memory cherished despite captivity. In Greece, broken pottery used as ballot pieces for ostracism occasionally contained names scratched by enslaved workers practicing writing they were forbidden to learn. Such acts illustrate an undeniable truth. Even when denied formal education, humans will seek ways to express themselves. These modest inscriptions transformed anonymous laborers into individuals with aspirations, frustrations, and private joys. Even agricultural communities, often romanticized as harmonious and egalitarian, contained marginalized voices. Tenant farmers, sharecroppers, and shepherds frequently lived under the authority of landowners who controlled harvests, tools, and housing. Their diaries rarely survive, but ecological studies of ancient fields suggest worn pathways, suggesting repetitive labor patterns, while pollen analysis shows which crops they planted, harvested, and processed. Clay sickles with repeated sharpening marks hinted the constant strain placed on tools and the people who used them. In many regions, songs and oral traditions preserved by later generations speak of loneliness, pride, and fatigue experienced by those who spent long days in fields or pastures, often far from community centers. These traditions, though recorded centuries later, may be among the closest echoes we have of rural marginalized voices. Gender-based marginalization permeated nearly every ancient society, yet women and gender nonconforming individuals found subtle ways to assert agency. In some cultures, weaving became not only an economic necessity, but a form of storytelling, with patterns symbolizing personal identity or clan heritage. In others, women maintained control over household rituals that shaped community cohesion. Even in places where law codes limited their rights, women influenced political and economic decisions through kinship networks, marriage alliances, and market interactions. Excavated marketplaces show that women often dominated the sale of food, textiles, and household goods, making them essential to local economies despite their absence from state records. Their voices resonate through the material culture they produced, the networks they maintained, and the spiritual practices they preserved.
Marginalization was not always enforced by elites. Sometimes, social norms or cultural prejudices led communities to ostracize individuals who did not conform. People with disabilities, for example, occupied ambiguous positions in many ancient societies. While some cultures treated them with compassion, others viewed them as omens or burdens. Yet skeletal evidence shows individuals with severe injuries or illnesses who lived many years after becoming impaired, implying that families and neighbors provided care long before formal medical institutions existed. These acts of quiet compassion form an essential part of shadow histories, revealing that empathy shaped ancient life just as much as inequality did. Throughout the ancient world, artists, performers, and storytellers emerged from marginalized backgrounds, using creativity as a means of survival and expression. Traveling musicians who entertained at markets or festivals often came from poor families, but wielded considerable influence as carriers of news and moral lessons. Potters painted scenes of everyday life rather than heroic battles, offering glimpses into the social dynamics that elite art ignored. Storytellers preserved myths, histories, and parables that reflected the experiences of ordinary people, tales of tricksters who outsmarted the powerful, of lovers separated by class, of wise elders guiding communities through hardship. These cultural traditions, passed orally across generations, form some of the deepest reservoirs of collective memory, holding narratives that state-sponsored histories attempted to erase. As we continue to excavate the past, both literally and metaphorically, we encounter a profound realization. Marginalized voices shaped the moral and cultural foundations of ancient societies in ways that elite records cannot capture. Their contributions formed the invisible scaffolding of daily life. Their struggles and adaptations reveal the true cost of empire building, urbanization, and social hierarchy. Their stories, though fragmented, enrich our understanding of humanity by showing that historical significance is not measured by power, but by lived experience.
The deeper we journey into the hidden layers of ancient experience, the more clearly we see that the marginalized were not merely background figures supporting the grand narratives of elites. They were active shapers of their worlds. Their silent histories reveal ingenuity born of necessity, communities built on mutual reliance, and a profound capacity for endurance. Yet these stories also show that marginalization was not a monolithic experience. It shifted across time, region, gender, class, and identity. In recognizing their complexity, we also recognize the richness and diversity of the ancient human condition. The shadows they left behind are not emptiness, but depth, an intricate tapestry woven from forgotten memories, unwritten rituals, and the quiet determination of those who lived beyond the boundaries of official record-keeping. Across the vast regions of Asia, for example, marginalized communities developed cultures that thrived in the spaces overlooked by major dynasties. In early China, dynastic annals focused primarily on court politics, military campaigns, and philosophical debates among scholars. Yet archaeological sites on the peripheries revealed villages where potters, farmers, and metalworkers lived in tightly connected clusters.
Their homes, constructed from packed earth and timber, show evidence of shared storage pits and communal kilns. These arrangements imply a deeply cooperative lifestyle, one that allowed them to withstand seasonal floods, droughts, and shifting political pressures. Even as imperial forces expanded, absorbing new territories and imposing taxation, these rural communities preserved local customs, dialects, and belief systems. Their resilience manifested in everyday practices, in the way mothers taught children to identify medicinal herbs, in the communal rituals performed during planting seasons, in the songs that accompanied threshing and weaving. Further south, in the intricate societies of ancient Southeast Asia, marginalized groups often inhabited dense forests or mountainous regions that imperial powers struggled to control. These communities, sometimes labeled tribal or uncivilized by neighboring cities, maintained autonomy by mastering their local environments. They negotiated with nature in ways that elites living in palaces could not fully comprehend. Archaeological evidence of terraced fields carved into steep hillsides, of irrigation channels built with remarkable precision, and of forest gardens cultivated with advanced ecological knowledge demonstrates that their expertise rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, that of urban agricultural systems. Oral traditions collected in later periods recount ancestral heroes who protected forests, taught the art of healing, or mediated between humans and spirits. These stories not only reflect spiritual beliefs, but encode ecological wisdom, knowledge essential for survival in environments where imperial law held little sway. Marginalized voices also played transformative roles in moments of social change. When empires collapsed, when droughts forced mass migrations, when new technologies disrupted long-established customs, it was often the marginalized who adapted most quickly. Their flexible identities and networks allowed them to traverse cultural boundaries with greater ease than elites tied to rigid hierarchies. In the wake of the Bronze Age collapse, for instance, seafaring groups and displaced farmers forged new communities that blended cultural elements from Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant. Elite histories later depicted these groups as raiders or barbarians, but archaeological research paints a more nuanced picture. They were artisans, sailors, and traders who reshaped Mediterranean economies, introducing new metalworking techniques, pottery styles, and trade routes. Their survival strategies became catalysts for innovation, yet their names and stories rarely survived beyond negative portrayals crafted by the powerful. In the Americas, the narrative of marginalized groups is similarly intertwined with creativity and adaptation. Before the rise of states like the Inca or Maya, countless small communities developed unique systems of governance and spiritual belief, many of which were family-based or clan-based rather than hierarchical. Their agricultural traditions, such as terrace farming in the Andean highlands or forest management in the Amazon, required deep understanding of local ecosystems. Even after powerful states emerged and began expanding, many of these communities maintained local autonomy by living in rugged terrains that resisted centralized control. Their identities remained fluid, shaped by intermarriage, trade, and shared rituals. While the monumental cities of empires received the most archaeological attention, it is these smaller groups that preserved continuity across centuries of upheaval. Their songs, carvings, and burial customs reveal a worldview rooted not in conquest, but in balance, with ancestors, with land, with the cycles of life. Stories of resistance, subtle and overt, form another crucial dimension of shadow histories. Marginalized groups often resisted domination not through grand rebellions, but through everyday acts of autonomy. In ancient Mesopotamia, workers sometimes delayed harvests to negotiate better conditions, a strategy noted indirectly in administrative tablets documenting unexpected shortages. In Egypt, religious hymns found in non-elite households occasionally diverged from official temple doctrines, suggesting that ordinary people reinterpreted spiritual narratives to fit their lived realities. Among enslaved populations in Greece and Rome, resistance took many forms,
slowing the pace of work, secretly educating one another, preserving banned cultural practices, or forming tight-knit communities of mutual protection. These acts rarely appear in the histories written by elites, yet they illuminate a powerful truth. Marginalized groups refused to be passive subjects of oppressive systems. Across the ancient Middle East, marginalized groups also shaped religious traditions in ways scholars are only beginning to understand. Many foundational stories of suffering, exile, and redemption likely originated in the lived experiences of people displaced by war or enslaved by large empires. Their laments, prayers, and songs of hope informed the spiritual literature that influenced later religious traditions. Simple clay altars, often found in rural homes far from major temples, contain traces of burnt offerings made during personal rituals. These altars were not part of state religion, yet they served as sacred spaces where individuals grappled with fear, illness, or uncertainty. Their prayers may never be recovered, but their emotional weight persists through material evidence: scorched surfaces, small animal bones, bits of incense, and handcrafted idols worn smooth with repeated handling. Shadow histories also teach us that mobility, whether voluntary or forced, played a central role in shaping ancient identities. Migrants, traders, shepherds, and refugees moved across landscapes carrying skills, songs, technologies, and memories. Their presence influenced linguistic developments, artistic motifs, and culinary traditions. In many regions, the foods we now associate with ancient civilizations emerged not from elite kitchens, but from the innovations of marginalized communities adapting to new environments. The blending of grains, the invention of portable cooking vessels, the use of fermented products for preservation, all these reflect the ingenuity of people who lived unstable lives. Though never acknowledged, they were the true cultural connectors of the ancient world.
The emotional texture of marginalized life is perhaps the most difficult element to reconstruct, yet also the most essential. Archaeological evidence offers glimpses: a mother's bead necklace placed beside an infant in a simple grave, a broken toy figurine left near a hearth, a repaired bowl indicating a family's reluctance to discard cherished objects. These artifacts hint at the tenderness, sorrow, humor, and affection that filled ancient households. While elite writings emphasize power and prestige, the emotional worlds of ordinary people reveal a more universal humanity. Love between spouses, grief over death, pride in craftsmanship, anxiety during droughts, joy during festivals. These experiences shaped ancient lives in ways official records rarely captured. Festivals and communal gatherings, though often celebrated under the auspices of elites, drew their true spirit from marginalized participants. Music played on handmade flutes or drums crafted from animal skins echoed through village squares. Dancing, sometimes spontaneous, sometimes ritualized, brought communities together regardless of social rank. Storytellers, often individuals without formal education, became treasured voices who stitched together history, morality, and entertainment. Their stories helped communities make sense of the world, offering explanations for natural disasters, social injustices, and personal hardships. Even when the narrative centered on gods or legendary heroes, the underlying themes reflected the lived realities of those at the margins. Children, too, represent an overlooked category within ancient society. The majority of children lived marginalized lives, facing labor demands from a young age. Their toys, simple clay animals, carved sticks, or woven dolls, reveal both creativity and scarcity. Many were apprenticed early, learning trades from parents or neighbors. Their fingerprints on unfinished pottery or half-carved wooden objects show the blending of play and work. Their burials, particularly in societies where child mortality was high, contained poignant symbols. Small bracelets, seeds meant to symbolize renewal, or animal figurines intended to protect the child in the afterlife. Though their voices are forever silent, the material traces of their existence reflect the hopes and griefs of the communities that nurtured them.
As the ancient world evolved, the boundaries of marginalization shifted. Sometimes entire populations found themselves marginalized due to changes in political ideology, technological innovation, or economic restructuring. When iron replaced bronze, for example, skilled bronze workers across Eurasia suddenly lost their central economic role. Some adapted by learning new techniques, others migrated in search of communities that still valued their craft. When large empires standardized religion, local deities once revered for generations became unclean or superstitious, forcing communities to practice their traditions in secrecy. In each case, marginalized groups demonstrated adaptability that elites often lacked, embracing change while striving to preserve identity.
The most profound lesson offered by shadow histories is that ancient societies were held together not by kings or generals, but by millions of ordinary people whose names never appeared in inscriptions. Their labor produced the food, textiles, tools, and goods that sustained cities. Their rituals preserved cultural memory. Their creativity enriched artistic traditions. Their resilience enabled communities to survive droughts, invasions, and political transformations. Without them, the civilizations we admire today, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, from China to Mesoamerica, could not have existed. As we uncover their stories, we also confront the ethical dimensions of historical interpretation. Traditional histories often perpetuated the same hierarchies that marginalized people in the first place. By focusing exclusively on elites, scholars erased the contributions of those who lacked the power to document their own experiences. Yet new approaches, archaeology, anthropology, oral history, and interdisciplinary analysis allow us to give voice to the voiceless. In doing so, we expand our understanding of what history truly is, not a parade of rulers and battles, but a vast, interconnected human experience shaped by countless individuals whose lives mattered deeply to the people around them, even if state archives ignored them. In the end, the shadow histories of the ancient world are not merely footnotes to grand events. They are the foundation upon which every civilization was built. Their stories illuminate the hidden currents that sustained agricultural systems, inspired artistic traditions, and preserved cultural values through generations. They reveal the strength of community, the power of ingenuity, and the enduring spirit of people who, despite marginalization, found ways to live, adapt, resist, and dream. When we pull their narratives out of the shadows, we do more than correct historical records. We restore humanity to the ancient world. We see not only the rulers and monuments, but the countless lives that shaped history through quiet persistence and unrecorded acts of courage. And in recognizing them, we also recognize ourselves. For the echoes of their struggles and hopes still resonate through time, reminding us that every voice, no matter how faint, has a place in the story of our shared human past.